Okay, we're continuing with Hidden History of Science by me, Pete Rogers. This right here is Sir Humphrey Davy, another great English science. And Britain did produce a lot of great scientists. He's one of the founders of modern chemistry. He isolated potassium, sodium, calcium, and magnesium. And one of the reasons I'm trying to show you all this stuff is so you know the truth. He was also famous for giving brilliant lecture presentations with daring chemical experiments and reactions right on stage, making metaphors and poetry about how science is part of God's design. And like I said, this is typical that these geniuses are very religious. He said, if I could choose what would be most delightful, and I believe most useful to me and another person, I should prefer a firm religious belief over every other blessing. He was also a mentor to the great religious scientist Michael Faraday. Most of what we consider the modern world and technology was built by white Christian men. That's a fact. It's not ambiguous. In the schools, you don't learn the truth. If you start opening the history books, it's obvious. I'm going to show you one after another, and I'm understating the case. I didn't have time to put them all in. Women are busy having babies, and in other countries, they usually have some, dictator who doesn't let anybody do anything, and they're not civilized. I'm sorry, but that's a fact all over the world. There was the old world of Europe. There was a new world of USA that started getting going. And then there was this giant third world. And then there was the East. The East tended to be places where there was no freedom, so very little progress would happen in those places. Even though there was plenty of smart people, without freedom, you're not going to develop the inventions. Okay, this guy right here is Joseph Guy Lussac. He helped figure out that water was 2-part hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, figured out iodine, the new element. Okay, these are some of the things this guy did. Here is Friedrich Schiller, the great German playwright. Ayn Rand said he's one of the greatest writers of all time. She loved him. He wrote the play, the poem that was used for Beethoven's Ode to Joy in his 9th Symphony. He helped run the theater with Goethe in Weimar, Germany, which was sort of like the German Renaissance of culture. Okay, I actually like him as a person better than I like Goethe. Goethe was, a great genius, but Goethe was a little bit of a flake, I think, too. Goethe is considered the German Shakespeare, so to speak. Okay, it's stalling out a little bit at this moment, but I did previous videos about Goethe, and you know what I like about Goethe? He was big on self-actualization, focusing one's energy, developing all of one's ability. And in order to do that, you have to spend a lot of time alone, reading and writing and studying. Okay, so here's Goethe. This is Goethe in the Roman Campagna. When he was around 40 years of age, he went back to Italy and studied everything he could. He was a giant fan of everything that had to do with the ancient Greeks. So that would be classicism, the ancient Greeks and Romans. And of course, he's real impressed by the Italian Renaissance. His most famous book was Sorrows of Young Werther, which he wrote when he was only in his 20s, about a girl breaking up with him when he was sad and the consequences of that. Then he wrote, like Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, self-development, and then Faust was his big poem, which I think is kind of a crazy poem. And he was a decent scientist and stuff too. But the biggest thing I'll remember about Goethe was he was so obsessed with everything to do with the Greeks. He had Greek paintings, statues all over his house in every room. He was pretty wealthy because he was friends with the royalty in Weimar. Okay, one more German for today. This guy is Humboldt, and he really developed the University of Berlin. Charles Wilhelm von Humboldt, okay? And they emphasized individualism and study, where, especially the ancient Greeks, anybody who cares about developing the brain will always want to study the ancient Greeks. And he also got his professors to do more original work rather than just, copying off the old Aristotelian stuff and the ancients. And so the University of Berlin, after his leadership, became one of the best universities in the whole world. Some call this combined interest in the classics and in science a type of neo-humanism. Because remember, the classics are the ancient Greeks and Romans, so neoclassical would be new interest in the Greeks and Romans. He said, however good or great a man may be, there is yet a better and greater man within him. To inquire and to create, these are the grand centers around which all human pursuits revolve. The more a man acts on his own, the more he develops himself. In large associations, he is too prone to merely become an instrument. Yeah, this is great. Can you imagine a university professor talking about self-development of the individual rather than all the nonsense they talk about nowadays? The purpose of a man's life is to develop his potential abilities. Among men who are really free, every form of industry becomes more rapidly improved. All the arts improve more gracefully. All the sciences extend the range. So that's true about Europe. Because the European nations, each one was often competing. Germany's competing with Britain, competing with Spain, competing with France. They're all trying to be the best. And it was at business, at making money, at industry. But it was also things like painting. It was also things like writing. And it was pretty routine for, like the Germans could all read English so they could read Shakespeare, for example. Okay, and everybody wanted to read and speak French because it was considered the cultured language. So you got a lot of people studying what other people are doing in other languages, and that leads to more self-awareness and more self-development, more competition, and more achievement. He says, if the mind loves solitude, it has thereby acquired a loftier character, and it becomes still more noble. The finest fruit that earth holds up to God is a well-developed man. Gosh, wouldn't you love to have the leader of a university talk like that instead of all the worthless crap they talk about nowadays? Nowadays, you can't get a job as a professor at a university, yet alone as the head of a university, unless you don't believe in any of this stuff, okay? Unless you hate white Christian men, okay? But there's a goal, I think, to diminish the white Christian man and his achievements in society, because what I see is this giant, tremendous push to bring back slavery. Now, I realize most people don't understand that because they got these like miniature little public school educations, but if you look around, anybody that wants to get rid of God, what they want to do is diminish the value of the individual, to say, no, he's not creating the image of God and part divine. No, he's just a talking ape. That's Darwinism. And because he's just a talking ape, he therefore has no rights, no intrinsic value, and is not entitled to anything. He's not entitled to property. He's not entitled to free speech. He's not entitled to privacy. He's not entitled to anything. And so be very concerned when you hear somebody saying we don't need religion. Because what they're saying is, you are worthless. That's what they're saying between the lines. Be very wary when you hear somebody say, you can't improve IQ. Because then what they're saying is that the masses, the proles, the ignorant peasants, are hopeless. They cannot be improved, and they're just talking apes, and they're worthless. Therefore, nothing, they don't deserve anything. That's what's being said between the lines, even though most people don't understand that, as simple as that is. So anyways, this guy built the best university in the world because he cared about the individual and wanted to develop them, and he had this religious worldview that each person matters, and so give him a chance to develop. Anyways, I hope you found that interesting.